Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Porch Talk with Pastor Zac. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today, whether you're driving into work, whether you're exercising, working out, whatever that might be, cutting grass. It's almost grass cutting season. We'll be there before too long. We are so thankful for you taking a half hour or so to spend time with us. And so, you know, in the last several months, as we've kind of started this podcast up, man, the Lord has blessed it in so many different ways, and God is using it. So do us a favor, subscribe, share it, send it to some of your friends, and make it part of your weekly listening. And so we are so thankful for you. But, you know, in the last several weeks, we've done a lot of different things in this podcast. We've covered some topics specifically. We've addressed some issues from Scripture. But one of the things that we wanted to do with this was when we have an opportunity to have just some special people here with us at Enon Baptist Church, is we want to give you a chance to get to hear from them. And a lot of times that's people that just mean so much to me, that I love and believe in. And so I want to introduce everyone today to Dr. Sonny Tucker. And he is a sweet friend of mine. I've known him for coming up close to 10 years now. But he is the former executive director of the Arkansas Baptist State Convention. Before that, was a pastor for many years and a big outdoorsman, just a fun guy to be around. But most importantly, Dr. Tucker is a lover of Jesus and a passionate person about winning people to Jesus and helping to mobilize the churches to go and win people to Jesus. Presently, he gets to serve on staff with the North American Mission Board, which is part of our Southern Baptist Convention as we give to the cooperative program, is that gets divvied up in different areas to help go and support our Southern Baptist seminaries, to train up our young men and women for ministry. It goes to the International Mission Board, which we've had Dr. Paul Chitwood on here, a friend of Dr. Tucker, with us before. And then some of that goes to the North American Mission Board, which is primarily focused on church planting in some of our most urban areas, most populated areas here in our nation and in Canada, to be able to win people for Jesus right here at home. And so, Dr. Tucker, thank you so much, man, for taking time to be with us.
Oh, what an honor, Pastor Zac, to be here and to be a part of this. This is such an exciting church. I can't believe all the great stuff that's happening and the wonderful folks that are here and the great spirit. So this is such a blessed time in the life of your church. And we miss you in Arkansas really, really bad.
Yes.
And we want you back.
Well,
but I'm glad that you're here.
Yes, we loved our time in Arkansas. What was so great, you know, with us being church planters and the Lord calling us to plant in that metro Little Rock area in the Saline County, Bryant, Benton communities, when we went up there, went up on faith and just, Lord, you've called us to be a part of this, and we got to play a part in seeing the Lord just birth a healthy church in that community. But what was so great, for those of you who are listening to us, so we were in a suburban, kind of suburb area of Little Rock, very similar, honestly, to our community here, where people would live in Little Rock, or they would work in Little Rock, and they would live in these communities, similar to us here in Morris, Gardendale, Warrior, live in these areas, work in Birmingham. But that's where the state convention offices were in. We're in Little Rock, honestly, on our side of Little Rock. And so many of your employees at that point, state missionaries, they lived in our community. And so when we were planning our church, their families would join our church. Now, we laughed and we said that we just had all their wives and children under watch care ministry, because on most Sundays they were out preaching all over the state and doing things like that. But so we got to really connect with you guys and got to connect with the guys at the state offices there. And so that was really a blessing. But so Dr. Tucker, I would love for our folks to just get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about you before you were Dr. Tucker, but you know, just little Sonny Tucker running around. What did that look like? What was kind of your story, really, of even growing up, and a little bit of how you came to faith in Jesus and what that looked like?
Grew up in a small town in South Arkansas. It's almost like a Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer kind of place. It was wonderful. We got to fish at the creeks and in the rivers, and we had a small cattle farm. So we got to drive tractors and trucks early and learn to work hard.
Oh, that's great.
At a small country church, and it was a good church. I still remember a bunch of rough, tough boys in Sunday school, and we had Miss Mary as a Sunday school teacher.
Okay.
And she was really big on getting saved.
Yeah.
And she would say, "Now, boys, have you been saved yet?" And of course, we knew what she meant.
Yeah.
This was probably about 8 years old, and we were like, yeah, one time, Miss Mary, we were swimming the creek, and I almost drowned, and somebody saved me. She said, no, that's not. And then somebody said, I was on a hill, and I was falling down the hill, and somebody saved me. She said, no. So we knew what we were doing.
Y'all were pestering her on
We
purpose.
were terrible.
Yeah.
But really, it stuck.
Yeah.
Because she made an emphasis on being saved. 9 years old, sitting in a service, I do not remember what the pastor was preaching on, but something clicked inside of me, like a light switch. It's time for you to be saved, Tucker.
Wow.
For some reason, I put it off for 3 years, dumbest thing I've ever done. And there was fear about the experience. There was apprehension. I think, would God even hear me if I asked him to save me?
Yeah.
And I just can't explain why I put it off, but it was a lot of consternation in my soul. And I asked God the whole time, Lord, don't let me die before I get saved. So we had a revival, and I had one of those old-timey preachers. He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
And funny and loving. And I still remember, he waved his hanky.
Yeah.
And then he blew his nose on his hanky. And then he wiped sweat off his face with his hanky. Those evangelists died early in those days. They had bad health practice. But he made salvation so plain and simple and beautiful.
Yeah.
So on Thursday night, I had two of my friends got saved first, and then I said, this is it. If he can save those guys, I think he would listen to me and save me. And, of course, this, Pastor Zac, God is just waiting on us to be saved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so saved at 12. I didn't get discipled. I got the glad hand, come down front and tell Sonny that we're glad you got saved.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any follow-up. At that time, I'm not sure we knew exactly the best way to do it. So about 15.
Which is true. I think even for those who are listening.
You're right.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you know for certain that you've given your life to Christ, but you feel, like you've never really progressed in that, then what you need is discipleship. And that's, you start for us here at Enon, we have a discipleship pathway. It starts with the gathering with Sunday morning, connecting in the gathering. And then we connect people in a life group, which is so important. It's where you build Christian relationships and friendships. One of the statements that we say here is that movements of God happen among friends. And then outside of a life group is where you would get into a disciple group. And that's, 3 to 6 people with a regular Bible reading plan where you can get to know one another, hold one another accountable, and somebody walk you through the scriptures. And again, like you said, that's vital to the Christian life, but so sometimes people miss that. And so, hey, if that's you listening and you're like Dr. Tucker, you gave your life to the Lord many years ago, but you've never been discipled, let us know here, and we would love to help you grow in that.
That is a great word, Pastor Zac, and God used that in my life as a pastor to help folks understand you've made a profession of faith and you really are saved, but you've not taken the steps forward, and it's just a miserable place to be.
Yeah.
Of uncertainty. I don't know exactly what's happened. I can't explain it. What does God want me to do next?
Yeah, you stay in a season of infancy in your walk with Christ where the Lord wants you to grow to maturity, and so you come to know the Lord, and then when did you kind of really start to get discipled, and how did your call to ministry, like when did all that happen? Yeah.
A couple of things came together at the same time, about 15. We got a new pastor that actually taught the Word. He made it plain, simple, and he taught the Word.
Yeah.
And he had some pretty high-impact leaders that came along beside him to help in the ministry. Not staff, really, but they really function as staff.
Yeah.
And discipleship. So at 16, the pastor and a business guy kind of took me in as like in a mentor relationship.
Wow.
And that was life-changing for me.
Yeah.
And then they also gave me places to serve, guarded, baby step, supervised places to serve.
Yeah.
They asked me at 15 to teach Sunday school class for a bunch of the rough boys like we were.
Yeah.
And, of course, here's the way it worked back then. They recruit you between Sunday school and worship, and they hand you the quarterly, and they say, Tucker, we need you to teach this class. If you don't teach it, ain't nobody else going to teach it.
Yeah.
And so your recruitment and training was that 2 minutes. Of course, if you start teaching Sunday school back then, you'll teach it till you die or Jesus comes back. You can't get out of it. Yeah. So I jumped into it, and I was terrible.
Yeah.
And those were the roughest boys, and they were, to me, like we treated Miss Mary,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
So finally, in desperation, one day I said, y'all don't remember a thing I've said. And they recited back what I had said the last 4 weeks.
Wow.
And I said, okay, it's sticking.
Yeah.
And then at 16, they asked me to help with a new Wednesday night program for community kids who weren't coming. And so, and I didn't know what to do. They said, just go with the flow. Just be you.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get many kids to come. This is a silly story. Rural folks understand this. But I was driving the tractor to feed cows one day.
Yeah.
And I drove by a vacant lot, and about 15 of the kids we wanted to come in the vacant lot. And I didn't plan this. I just pulled in, Pastor Zac, and I said, y'all want to ride with me to feed the cows? Yeah. So they jumped on the little platform on the back.
Yeah.
They were sitting on the wheel well. There were so many. They were sitting on the on the cab of the tractor, the front of the tractor. You know, we didn't know anything about liability insurance back then.
Yeah.
And there were so many kids on the back that the front of the tractor would come up.
Oh my
and
gosh.
I almost couldn't steer it. But they threw mud on each other. They threw cow pies on each other. But when we asked them to come on Wednesday night, they came.
Wow.
And God did an incredible work, and it stuck in me. This is not that hard. When you treat people with respect and you love people like Jesus did, and you make them understand how valued they are to God by how we value them, it's not that difficult.
Just love people.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think probably a call to ministry came out of that when I was 18.
Yeah. Wow.
So.
You know, it's funny. You think about funny stories. You mentioned getting roped into Sunday school. You know, I was after I came to faith in the Lord, and was not a believer very long. And again, teenager, it was one of those, hey, would you want to teach Sunday school this morning? And I will never forget, and some of our people here at Enon have heard this before, but the first Sunday school lesson I ever taught was on Jacob and Eshua, because I didn't know how to pronounce Esau. And I did the whole Sunday school lesson on Eshua, and people were snickering and laughing, and I had no idea what they were laughing about. And then after it was over with, the pastor came up to me and said, hey, Brother Zac, that was really good. Have you ever heard it called Esau? You know, and I sat there and I remember thinking, I'll take that into consideration. You know, I tried to, this was, so yeah, man, what a great picture though. You just learning early on just to love people. And, you've heard that statement. This is just for people, even that are listening, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I'm thinking about those who are in the workplace right now, and maybe you're on your way to a job where you're surrounded by coworkers who are far from God, people that we talk about all the time, that are in your circle, kind of in your oikos map, as far as connecting. Some of the easiest ways to begin gospel conversations with them is just go, hey, we all got break, let's go to lunch together and just get to know them, spend time with them, or invite them to jump on your tractor while you're feeding cows. So the Lord kind of calls you into ministry, and then you start pastoring. I'd love to hear, is there anything that I know you said you pastored 3 or 4 churches there?
Pastored 4 churches. I actually started off as a student pastor at a church in Hot Springs.
Okay.
And just always had a heart for young people.
Yeah.
In fact, I kind of say it this way, Pastor Zac. I really never gave up my call to student pastor. I just added senior pastor to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't go away. It stayed there. I always had a focus on young folks. So first church I pastored, I was a student at Washington Baptist University, and we started off with 14 in Sunday school and 16 in worship.
Wow.
The first VBS we had 4 kids.
Wow.
And it was a very difficult church. They'd had, 16 pastors in 12 years maybe. So
yeah.
I should have known what was coming.
Yeah.
But 2 or 3 things happened. I learned that there were some difficult folks there. You learn to love difficult people, but confront them biblically with the challenges. And so you just find out that God's way works.
Yeah.
And so we got that out of the way, and we really grew exponentially. I learned something starting off that small, though, Pastor Zac. Well, we went from 16 in worship to 20. It was on our knees, inch by inch. And you learn that every person that joins the church or starts attending, it's not a number. They're a unique individual, a special soul to Jesus.
Yeah.
And we went from 20 to 25 and 25 to 30 with that basic understanding. Every person is not a mere number. They're a special soul to Jesus.
Yeah.
And I never got away from that, even in working with the state convention and maybe thousands of people. Every person is a very special, unique person to Jesus.
Yeah.
They're not a mere number.
Yeah.
And so God taught me that. We reached tons of teenagers. It was phenomenal. It was a wonder. I was dual career and going to seminary and working part-time, and it was wonderful. Next church was in the Northeast Arkansas Delta, and they'd been through a difficult season, but it was unbelievable what happened. You know, we started off with about 65 in worship, and we doubled that. But there were very few teenagers there. But on Wednesday night, we would run. I remember counting we had 92 young people there.
Wow.
They came from everywhere. And
and just for context of people, like you get to Northeast Arkansas, this is farming Delta community. You know, you get 92 teenagers, to a Wednesday night service. That may be 3/4 of the teenagers in the town. This is just these communities, like that.
One of the farmers used to joke that I live 17 miles from the church, but I can see the church from my front door. So it's just wide open space. But it was unbelievable what God did. Third church was still in the Delta, and it was a wealthier, educated First Baptist Church type.
Yeah.
And so there was a great sense of training there with folks that are intellectual. They don't respond to emotion as much as teach me, what does the Bible say? Help walk through this in a linear fashion from where I am to where I need to be.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful what God did. Last church was the fun, easy church. It kind of reminds me of Enid, to be honest. They hadn't had any problems, and the growth was phenomenal. And we had to go to 2 worship services, looking at 2 small group times. And then the convention contacted me and asked me to come to work for them in the evangelism and church health area. And their statement was, you've been 4 different churches, 4 different size churches. 3 of them were very difficult, and you worked with that church through a health process to be a healthy, vibrant church, and that represents Arkansas.
Yeah.
And we felt like you have something to add.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, just so our listeners understand, the way that most Southern Baptist churches work in their state is, again, I mentioned before, the cooperative program and those things. So and this is all voluntary. We say this here at Enon. We voluntarily are grateful to be a part of the Southern Baptist Convention, but there's, it all goes from the local church to the convention. There's nothing from the convention that is forced onto the local church. That's why we believe church autonomy, we believe is the New Testament plan. But the beautiful thing is that it's all a voluntary cooperation. And so there's the big level cooperation that is national, international, but then there's the state conventions. And for those who are listening, the state conventions, basically, it is gathering churches together voluntarily that are of like-minded faith, which our connection point is the Baptist Faith and Message, a theological document, and that we all kind of pool our money. We give to the state convention to help reach our states for Jesus. And a lot of that, what ends up happening is churches that are healthier situations, they are giving to their state convention, and then through the state convention, they are helping to train, encourage, and equip churches that maybe need some help, in that area. So it's the greatest recipients a lot of times in the state conventions are the churches that are in need, of some of that. And so it's a real blessing. Again, we're part here in Alabama with the Alabama Baptist State Convention. Dr. Rick Lance is our executive director here, and their staff, they serve so many people in our community. And we're so thankful for them. But Dr. Tucker, I'll be honest with you, as far as in my time at Arkansas, when we planted our church, the Summit Church, Saline County, we were so celebrated and so encouraged and supported by the Arkansas Baptist State Convention. You guys wanted, and this was under your leadership, saw the state, and you wanted every person in the state of Arkansas to hear about Jesus, to come to a saving relationship with him. Part of that, see every individual person. There's a lot of people that were in the state of Arkansas that didn't know Jesus, and y'all wanted to help be a part of seeing that. And so part of that was through churches being planted out of the state convention, but then also the state convention helping other churches like Summit who were in the process of planting churches themselves. And so you guys came alongside us just for our listeners, I remember we come into a community, nobody knows who we are, and the first thing you do is you just got to start meeting people, connecting with people. And we did that through like block parties. We would come into these big neighborhoods, big subdivisions, local kind of parks, and we would just set up block parties and just love people and share the gospel with them. And the state convention had 4 or 5 of these pull-behind trailers. It was a block party trailer that y'all have put together, and it was the most organized thing. You could open this trailer up, and there were bounce houses, there were snow cone machines, popcorn machines, generators, folding tables, chairs, everything that you could possibly imagine. And it was all stocked, and it was free. It didn't cost us a dime. All we had to do was pull up a truck, hook it up, go to where we wanted to go and share people about Jesus. And we had an outreach event that was ready in an hour, and that came under your leadership there. So share a little bit about, just your ministry there at the state convention. Again, you retired out of that role just a few years ago. Now working with the North American Mission Board. But share just a little bit about your season of ministry there at the state convention. And when you look back, what were some of the things you were most excited about?
Well, it was a wonderful, wonderful time. I can't think of any days right now that I didn't enjoy. It was always exciting. But for 15 years, I worked with the Evangelism and Church Health Division. And of course, you're right, Pastor Zac, our churches are completely independent, autonomous. We just come along beside and help churches in any way they want. And of course, it was easy to help you. In fact, I remember when the word got out that there's going to be a church plant in Saline County. Well, we really don't need one there. They're not going to make it. Well, no, they will make it because they've got the sponsoring church was a phenomenal church, still is. And I said, they got one of the bright stars in Arkansas that's going to do it. He's real, he's transparent, he loves people, he's authentic, and he just makes it easy. And so it was an exciting time to see. So we just came along and helped, and it made it so easy. But we did help plant churches. That was a big emphasis of what we did. There are different pockets of areas in Arkansas that didn't have a healthy, viable church. And then also, even in places there were churches, there were places where there are different tribes of people that didn't have a church that's in their tribe. I had some folks say one time, the church plant, they got some weird people. One of the weird, well, they got pink hair and purple hair. You know how many folks in your town have pink hair and purple hair? Yeah. And I don't see them in your church.
Yeah.
And I'm not downing that church, but there were churches that were planted that reached different tribes of people. Sometimes it's languages. Yeah. Sometimes it's people that move in from another country, and they want to worship in their language and in their culture. So, but ultimately, we trust the churches to say, we want to plant a church. We don't plant churches. Churches plant church. Yeah. Or the convention denomination doesn't plant churches. So we come alongside a church that says we feel led to do this. Yeah. And it was really good. We saw a lot of churches planted. We were very big in disaster relief. Yeah. And so that's one of the great things that Southern Baptists do. We had a big focus on students. Yeah. Did a lot of stuff with students and helped churches reach students. And that was very fruitful. We did a lot of training. Yeah. We had a lot of events that we had staff that did training, Pastor Zac, but a lot of times we brought in guys like you to say, this guy's on the field. He's on the front line. I mean, he's got smoke in his hair from being right in the middle of where it's thick and doing great things. And so there was just an experience and a depth and a passion that came from you as you did that work and the others. So
what I loved about my time at the state convention was there was always a sense to where churches that were a little bit ahead of us as far as in reaching people, they had creative ideas and things, that there was always avenues where we were able to fellowship and connect and learn, kind of get best practices of how to reach people in different areas. And the state convention, really all y'all did was just kind of create the table, the space for those kind of conversations to take place. And again, one of my favorite things that you were able to lead and be a part of, Brother Sonny, was being able to recruit guys like Bill Eliff, and he's going to be on our podcast in just a few weeks. But to be able to create guys like that who have a heart for prayer and revival, And as much as I loved the evangelism conference, the annual meeting, and all those things, my favorite gathering was that yearly pastors' prayer gathering, where pastors from all over the state would come together and for a day and a half and just spend time in the presence of God and pray. And I genuinely, and what was so beautiful again is that was by reaching a lot of the church planting work that y'all did in the Arkansas Delta, which was primarily African American region that typically did not have connections in the Arkansas Baptist State Convention, is that you guys, man, were able to really bridge even the racial gap there. And over the year and the time we were there, man, the Arkansas Baptist State Convention looked more and more like heaven, man, is that they were brothers and sisters in Jesus of every tribe, nation, and tongue. And like you said, every people group, every culture. African-American churches in the Delta with, upscale, real high-dollar communities like Northwest Arkansas, Walmart, and all those places are. And you'd have those two pastors praying together, praying for each other. And that was just a picture of heaven. Yeah. And so we loved getting to serve alongside you in our time there. Before we wrap up, we've got just a few minutes here. Dr. Tucker, if you've got people that are listening here on our podcast and they say, here I am, Dr. Tucker. I hear about your story of God working and moving through you and through these other people, but they want to get in that they know Jesus, but they want to get in the game. They want their life to matter for the glory of Jesus. And what would be one thing you could share with them that you would say to help them take those first steps to serve the Lord?
Well, a lot of it's going to depend on where they are, Pastor Zac. That's a great question, by the way. They're conduits to get you moving in the right direction. If you're not connected to a church, you're going to have a very difficult time with a conduit, because God works through the local church and through the local church. Yeah. And then a lot of the ministries we do come from that. Second thing is going to be a good local church. Yeah. And let me rephrase that. You can define good in several ways, but an impactful local church. A local church that puts an emphasis on the Word of God, that puts an emphasis on prayer and walking in the power of the Holy Spirit. A church that has an emphasis on reaching people. It's not just about the folks here, but it's also about the folks that are not in the church, that have a community impact and even statewide and even international impact. Yeah. So a church that has that healthy perspective that God has asked us to do. And also, I think they've got to learn to walk in a deeper walk. There's a deeper walk with Jesus where He is real to me, and it's a personal thing. Yeah. That I have a relationship with Him, and then a certain depth that they have to go through to be a leader. You move into being a spiritual leader. Yeah. And that comes from having input in your life from the church and other leaders in the church. And so that's probably the start.
Yeah, get it connected in a church. Yeah. That's the launching pad. We say this at every new member class here at Enon, is that when the Lord Jesus decided to set up the plan for how His ministry would advance beyond Him after He is raised from the grave and ascended back to the right hand of the Father, He established the ministry of the local church. And there's no plan B. Yeah. That's where people connect. Well, Dr. Tucker, we are out of time, but I want to tell you thank you so much for being here with us today and for spending the weekend with us here in Alabama. We hope to have you back again sometime soon. And friends, I want to thank y'all for being with us here for another edition of Porch Talk. God bless you, and we just pray that you would connect in a local church, follow the Lord, serve Him, and know that God is writing your story, and He wants to truly use you for His name and His glory. And there's nothing more fulfilling and satisfying in this life than to feel the hand of God working through you, because it is what you were created for. So God bless you. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you again for another edition of Porch Talk. See you then.